Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 133, and it is about how to be pissed off. So I'm recording this episode ahead of time because when it airs on May 14th, I will be leading Creatrix with 10 souls who have come from far and wide, sometimes very far, to be with me and each other in community in the low country of South Carolina, in the swamps, by the sea, learning witchcraft and eating food and taking naps. So that's what I'm doing right now at this very moment, probably, if you're listening to this in a timely fashion. This also means that by the time this episode airs, cycle 28 of the Audacity Project will have completed, and the tater tots will have been released into the wild to do whatever the fuck they want with the skills and tools that they've learned. There will be another cycle 29, of the Audacity Project in the fall. Exact dates are to be determined, but if you want to be on the waitlist for that, and if you're interested in the project, this is what I would recommend. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. You'll be the first to know, and you'll get extra support, extra goodies. And that also means that it's mid-May, which is the most beautiful time to be here in the low country. The temperatures are mild, but it's warm. There are lots of thunderstorms. The flowers have bloomed. Everything has bloomed. Did you know Spanish moss blooms? It's a flowering plant. It's an air plant, but it actually does flower. It's very tiny, so you have to look closely, but it's there. And this can sometimes be quite a stark contrast to the fuckery that we witness happening all around us. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting a pretty thick skin around it, and that makes me sad. I like being a sensitive person. I like having a strong response to injustice. But when injustice is happening at such a rapid and outrageous pace all around you, you might find you don't have the resources to just be outraged all the time. I want to tell you that that response is okay. If you're not walking around in a constant rage all the time, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. We are animal creatures, and we only have so many resources. Rage is a very expensive thing to feel. So I thought it would be a good idea to address how to process anger, particularly if you really don't like feeling it. Now, to be specific, I'm not telling you how to make anger go away, but rather just how to embrace it and let it be a natural part of your animal life, because it is a very helpful emotion. When I sat down to record this episode, this is not by request, it's just something that came up for me and I'm gonna talk about it. And I did a cursory search on the internet to see if there were things that maybe I had overlooked. I was not expecting to find much because the internet is just full of terrible advice and AI bots telling you to journal about your feelings. Yes, we already knew that, Sherlock. Thank you so much. But this time I actually did find something helpful. It was an article from NPR, and I'm going to link that in the show notes if you want to read the whole thing. I'm not going to cite the whole thing. But this article was published last year, and it's by Hillary Jacobs Hindle and Julie Fraga, I don't know. Anyway, they both work in mental health, and actually found some good stuff in this little article, namely the two different kinds of anger, which I think are worth defining so that you can name what is happening to you as it's happening to you. The most obvious kind of anger is called core anger. That's the definition that they give it. in the article, and core anger derives naturally as a result of perceived violation. I've been saying for years that anger arises when you perceive a violation of your value system. So this is what I'm talking about. This is a very healthy emotion. It spurs us on to take action, right? And we'll talk a little bit about what to do with that impetus in a second. And it also points you back to what you love, because if it arises because of a perceived violation of your value system, it's really pointing at your value system. So if you want to know what you love, look at what pisses you off. And a beautiful quote that I remember reading after this year's election was, "The pain you feel is because of what you love." And sometimes it is the cost of being loving. Now, the second type of anger defined in this article is defensive anger. And defensive anger is a cover story. And this is a direct quote. "This type of anger serves to protect us from experiencing other emotions." End quote. Have you seen that another beautiful quote that's circling around on the internet? I'll see if I can find it. And if I can, I'll put it in the show notes. But to summarize, and it went something like this: "I sat with my anger long enough until it told me its name was grief." And of course, anger can hide lots of other more uncomfortable emotions, not just grief, but terror, also shame. And it makes sense why we would prefer, as a living animal creature, to experience anger rather than shame, grief, or fear, because anger is empowered, where shame, fear, and grief are not. That doesn't make them bad. It just means they're not empowered. And anger gives us an impetus towards action, and sometimes those other emotions don't. So I think one of the most helpful things to do first is to be able to accurately name what we're experiencing as we're experiencing it. And it's helpful because anger can be harmful. We all know this. But let me clarify, and the article helps point this out as well. Anger isn't harmful. It's the effects of anger that's harmful. Emotions themselves are not harmful. It's the actions that they produce that can be harmful to ourselves and others. So if someone is completely unwilling to experience anger, they will probably do whatever they can and use every tool in their arsenal to make that anger turn into something else. They can turn it onto themselves, harm themselves, be drunk for 3 months straight. I don't know. Try and ruminate over a problem over and over and over again, never finding a solution because there isn't a solution other than just feeling the anger and being able to let it move through you. And it's annoying how easy it is for me to say that, because it's very, very difficult to do it, especially when every lesson you've ever absorbed, either subconsciously or overtly, told you that you weren't allowed to be angry because it was not pleasing. And it was not quiet, and it wasn't pleasant to other people around you. I don't know about you, but that was the message, and I got it loud and clear. So as a very young person, anytime I felt anger, I immediately just changed it into something else. Because everything that I was rewarded for was being pleasing. And from a social perspective, I get why this happened. But I still had to learn how to be angry. And it happened to me when I was 19, 20 years old. I think I've discussed this briefly before on the podcast. But I was in college and I was living with my college roommate and BFF, Christy. And I just woke up one day in a fit of rage, and I didn't leave that fit of rage for weeks, and I hated it. It was almost as though all the anger that I hadn't felt in the first 19, 20 years just all decided to come to the surface and break through. There was no reason. I couldn't even pinpoint the reasons. It was just there. It was a very dark and painful time, very confusing. And I hated being an angry person. Of course I did. It went against everything that I had been trained to be. But sometimes our humanity is going to have its way with us, with or without our permission. And that is what happened to me. This is also like a side effect of perfectionism. If you're not allowed to be angry, you're not allowed to make mistakes. You're not allowed to be found fault with. At some point, that dam's going to break. And it should. I know I've discussed perfectionism a lot lately, and it's because it's really present for me right now. Like, I'm about to turn 43 next month, and I am only just now discovering, or rather reclaiming, my right to be wrong. And you might be thinking, but you talk about shadow work all the time, and I thought you were comfortable with like unpleasant aspects of yourself, and you'd be right about that. Not only am I comfortable with them, but I really, really like them, but only when it's just for me. God forbid someone else be brought into the mix. And that's what I've been finding a lot of freedom with, is not just being able to experience unpleasant things and unpleasant sides of myself, and knowing that I can handle the fallout. If I'm angry, if I lash out and I'm rude, and then someone has their feelings hurt, I can handle that. So can they. Let's handle it. But furthermore, and something that I think will resonate for a lot of you, is that we have to allow people to experience the natural consequences of their behavior. Because for so many people, particularly people on the HSP spectrum, people who are profoundly empathic, you tend to save people from themselves, process their feelings for them, clean up their messes for them, because you don't want them to feel bad. But sometimes they earned that feeling bad. It's their feeling bad. Why can't they have it? Also, you can't do it all for them. You're going to get burnt out and exhausted and then crumble. And that would be such a shame and such a waste, because you're so beautiful. These gifts you have are so profound. Now, I know I've already said, like, there's this awesome quote a couple times, and I'm going to say it again. It's actually not a quote because I can't find it anywhere, so I'm not sure where I read it. But anyway, it was someone asking their therapist, like, how do I know if I'm genuinely being kind or if I'm giving into my, like, codependent, people-pleasing, perfectionist tendencies and, like, taking care of people at the expense of myself? And the answer was really simple. It was resentment. And resentment's just like anger in a nice coat. Like, we feel resentment when we have given to others and taken care of other people's needs, and our own needs aren't getting met. And this leads right into something called the Karpman triangle. I'll put a link to a graphic of the Karpman triangle in the show notes. And at each point, there's a different word. There's rescuer, prosecutor, and victim. So really the first step is rescuer, where you take on responsibilities that don't belong to you, save people from their own feelings or consequences that they didn't ask you to do most of the time. And in doing this, you sacrifice your own needs being met and don't express them or even acknowledge that they're there in the first place. Number 2 is the victim stance. This happens after you rescue someone. Of course, they didn't ask you to do that, and they might not have even appreciated it. And now you didn't get your needs met and you weren't appreciated, so now you're mad. And that's a fair response, but this is the victim section of the triangle. Then we become the persecutor, which is just a wall of anger quietly seething in the corner. And the persecutor has a long list of grievances against all the people that have not appreciated them or given back to them what they gave in the first place. So they spend a lot of time blaming and criticizing. And this sort of like oversimplified triangle keeps people trapped in this, what they call the codependent cycle. And here's my oversimplified way out, because the only thing missing from each of these is the acknowledgement and self-validation of one's own needs. Because if someone was trapped in the codependent triangle and they acknowledged that their life had value, that their needs were valid and not only like worth fulfilling, but, you know, worth their own resources to ask for or pursue, then you have a way out. Now, this leads me to like, this is also in the article that I referenced as like a way to actually process that anger, which was kind of the point of this whole podcast. I didn't even mean to talk about the codependent triangle. It just kind of came up because I think that's a lot of reason that a lot of people are angry, particularly femmes. As most of us were trained to ignore our own needs at the expense of the comfort of everyone else. And we were trained really, really well. Now, that part's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to tend to that in ourselves. You're the adult in the room. I'm so sorry. So right here's where I summarize the actionable advice, okay? 1 is to name and claim the things that you are feeling, particularly if it's anger, and see if there is something underneath that. Is your anger a more empowered form of shame? Is it hiding something else that is more true? 2, if you're protecting other people from their own feelings, let them have their feelings. Let them have their human experience. Let them have the consequences of their behaviors. Let them. And 3, which we haven't talked about yet, this is interesting and it's stupid simple. Like, I'm almost annoyed to tell you it's that simple. And it's basically a fantasy role-playing scenario in which instead of walking around ruminating in the back of your head all day about why you're angry, you just sit quietly, close your eyes, and fantasize about what that anger wants you to do, and then fantasize about doing it. It's important that this isn't necessarily put into action because, as we know, anger can cause harmful actions, including but not limited to violence. Violence, there's never a reason for violence that's good enough. And violence is not just punching someone in the face. It's punching walls. It's throwing tables. It's yelling. It's slamming doors. Those are violent actions. This is the reason that those seemingly more innocuous actions I just described cause PTSD responses in people, because it's violence. Now, in your head, in your fantasy role-playing, you can do all of those things. It's just a thought pattern. It's just electricity in your brain. It's giving your brain a way to feel satisfied, to feel justified, even if none of it happens in real life. I actually tried it this morning, and I was annoyed again at how effective it was. Because when I look back over my little fantasy role play where I said everything that I wanted to say and I did everything that I wanted to do in response to my anger, I felt it lift. It didn't go away. It'll come back. But I felt it lift, like it didn't have that grip on me anymore. Because I gave my brain a way out. And I'm glad that it only happened in my brain, because I don't want the harm that would be caused by me lashing out and yelling and saying a bunch of hurtful shit in unproductive ways. I can just have that on my own. Now, the real kicker here is that if there is something that you need to do to ask for what you need to care for your own needs, then you still have to do that. You can't like just have fantasy role plays in your head and then go right back into the codependent triangle and continue doing that. Yeah, our responsibility doesn't end after the fantasy role play, but it's helpful. And it's so helpful to be able to name how you're feeling when you're feeling it. And it's an act of love to the people in your life as well. Like, who among us hasn't seen someone that we love like boiling away silently on the couch? You're like, are you okay? What's going on? They're like, I'm fine. And since they have shut the door on any kind of communication, what can we do? And wouldn't it feel better if they could just say, I'm really, really angry about this particular thing. It will pass, but right now, I'm just angry. And they're allowed to be. You're allowed to be. It is a healthy and rational response, particularly in light of I'm gesturing broadly in my office. So today's episode brought to you by I got mad today, and then I wanted to talk about it and talk about how to deal with it because it took me so long to be able to deal with it, even in the way that I am right now. This is not a master course by any means, but it's a start. So check the show notes if you want any of these resources. Thank you so much for listening and letting me live in your ear for 20 minutes. If you have requests for future episodes, I'd love to hear them. You can reach me always on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. This podcast is powered by Patreon, and so much of what I do would not be possible without their support. So thank you for standing with me. So go out there and get mad and then get glad and then get mad again. You don't have to be perfect. You can be messy. You can be unpleasing. You can be disgusting. Enjoy it all, hoes. It belongs to you. Now don't go back to sleep.